Talkback with William Crawley on BBC Radio Ulster.
Good afternoon. We have footage of a police officer in London being challenged by the radical Muslim cleric Anjem Chowdhury for wearing a Help for Heroes wristband while on duty. The officer later removed the wristband. Should he have kept it on? Should police officers be allowed to wear Help for Heroes wristbands? Help for Heroes, you might remember, is a charity offering assistance to British military personnel who have been injured while in active service. But footage has now been published on YouTube, inevitably, of the radical Muslim cleric Anjem Chowdhury challenging a Metropolitan Police officer in the street after he saw the officer wearing a Help for Heroes wristband. Have a listen to this.
I see you got your Help for Heroes badge, Johnny. So what does that mean exactly? Is that a political agenda? Constable Addiston? Is that a political agenda? Why is it that millions of people came out on the streets to condemn the soldiers who murdered people in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yet you're supporting them with your Help for Heroes band?
It's really relevant, is it?
It is relevant, because as an officer, you're not supposed to have a political agenda. You're not supposed to support the British government in their foreign policy, are you, really? And you have a band where you're supporting the soldiers of this country. So what does that mean exactly?
That's Anjem Chowdhury talking to a police officer in London in a manner that many people have described online today as bullying. And the police officer later removed his wristband, that Help for Heroes wristband. We have clarified the case with the Metropolitan Police that, in fact, officers within the Met Police are permitted to wear poppies and that particular wristband. We've also been in touch with the PSNI, who have a different policy. Officers are not permitted to wear wristbands with any kind of logo, or except and perhaps it's a medical reason. Abdullah Al-Andalusi is the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative. Good afternoon to you. Welcome.
Hi there.
Also with me in the studio in Belfast, Doug Beattie, who's an Ulster Unionist councillor in Craigavon, a former captain in the Royal Irish Regiment. You're welcome too. Doug, good afternoon.
Brilliant.
Abdullah, first of all, do you regard what we've just heard as a form of bullying by Anjem Chowdhury?
Well, I think that Anjem Chowdhury is being typically provocative. I believe that people can call for support to any cause they want. But while I disagree strongly with the manner that Anjem Chowdhury accosted the police officer, as I strongly disagree with Anjem Chowdhury on many things, I do feel that there are questions of impartiality and neutrality that need to be raised, as well as consistency with causes which the government permit to be supported by the civil service or civil servants, and those that it doesn't allow to be supported by the civil service and civil servants. So I think these are needed questions that have to be raised. So you'd like to see
a ban on that wristband so that police officers inactive while they're on duty cannot wear it?
Well, I probably would want to call for consistency, really, because the current government wants to prevent any civil service engagement with groups or movements or organisations or causes which they deem to be extremist, for example, or controversial, and yet they have no problem telling police forces that they can support causes which some deem to be controversial. So really, I'm only calling for consistency.
Well, Help for Heroes isn't a terrorist organisation. It's a charity helping soldiers who've been injured in conflicts.
I know, but it's those conflicts which are controversial, the ones which involve going overseas, invading other people's countries, occupation. Some say for oil, for geostrategic control. And this has caused a lot of, obviously, controversy amongst
You could say the same
community.
thing about poppies, Abdullah, couldn't you?
Well, indeed, many people do. Many pacifist groups, many groups which are obviously anti-war and also, anti-certain types of foreign policy do and have raised those concerns. And I think that the PSNI probably are demonstrating consistency, whereby they say if one cause can't be supported, then no cause should be supported. So whatever is done, it should be done consistently, basically. That's really all I'm saying.
Doug Beattie, do you think the Metropolitan Police have something to learn from the PSNI here?
Absolutely not. I think our situation over here is very different from the rest of the UK. And where I would agree with Abdullah is that Chowdhury did go out of his way to be provocative. He did want to create a scene, and well done to the police officer for not rising to it. But the reality is, Help for Heroes is a registered charity. It helps service men and women who have been touched by conflict overseas. And this man wore this and is allowed to wear this to show support. And we should not be allowed as a nation, and this man should not have allowed himself to be bullied by anybody to take it off. We have the way we live our lives, and we support our armed forces, and I think he was just supporting the armed forces. So I don't see any issue in this whatsoever. And these people who...
Well, Abdullah says it's one thing to support the armed forces and to give charitable help to people who've been injured, but by doing so, you're also endorsing conflicts which are very controversial, and that's a political gesture.
You're absolutely not endorsing conflicts. You're looking after those people who are touched by conflict. These are people who have come back from conflict, who need help, and Help for Heroes helps those men and women adjust back into life and deal with some terrible, terrible injuries. And I'm slightly bored of people who say that we went into Afghanistan to fight against Muslims. Let me tell you, and I've said this many, many times, I fought shoulder to shoulder with Muslims every single time I was in Afghanistan. And I have said this on time and time again. The bravest, most noblest man I have ever known was an Afghan Muslim who I fought beside in Garmsay in 2006. So for people to think we went to this country just to kill Muslims is totally incorrect, and they really need to get a grip of themselves.
08459 555 678. Let's get some of your reaction to this. Do you think the police officers should have taken that wristband off? And do you think the PSNI are right to have a rule that would prevent any police officers here who wanted to wear such a wristband from actually doing so? You can text 81771, and we're on Twitter at BBC Talkback. Abdullah, of course, we all remember Lee Rigby and the terrible atrocity around Lee Rigby, who was identified apparently because he was wearing a Help for Heroes T-shirt.
Well, I mean, just to put Lee Rigby aside just for 1 sec, just to discuss what was mentioned, helping soldiers touched by conflict, as if it was a disease that inflicted them and they were in a place of safety and security. No, these soldiers left this country to go to other people's countries and touch conflict upon them. So they could have been conscientious objectors, and they could have said, no, we don't believe in this conflict. Many British soldiers have been and are conscientious objectors and have refused to go to Afghanistan and other places. Afghanistan, a place that the British Army has invaded for the 4th time in the last 150 years. So it has always been the site of the great game for geostrategic control. Iraq, obviously, the oil and its location. So we've been here before. This idea that we're going for any kind of humanitarian reason is bunkum, and it's demonstrated to be bunkum by political analysis upon political analysis, and there's cross-community support for a more critical stance against this kind of foreign policy. But we don't have issues against the soldiers. It's the foreign policy that it represents, and the fact that the police are there, like any government institution, should be neutral. Now, if an individual person wants to show support, that's fine. But if that's the case, then the government should be consistent and allow other civil servants to show support to organisations that the government disapproves of, but are not. And
if you're being consistent, that means you should ban police officers even wearing the poppy in London.
Look, my call is only for consistency. So if police are allowed to wear wristbands to show that for Help for Heroes, they should be allowed to wear wristbands for help for Iraqi and Afghan orphans as well. So that's really what I'm saying, is that if we're going to be consistent, then let's be consistent across the board.
Okay, let me take that up with Doug. Do you accept that analogy?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
And if this is
You'd be happy enough for the police officer.
If this is a registered charity that was supporting children in Iraq and Afghanistan who have lost their parents, or homeless children, absolutely the police officer should be allowed to wear it. But I don't know.
What about a wristband that's pro-Gaza or supportive of the Palestinian cause?
Well, that's really
that would be fine for a police officer.
Well, I don't know. That's up to the police to decide whether or not that's right or whether that's not wrong. That's not up for me to say that.
Well, you're entitled to a view about it.
No, and I'm about to tell you. But if it's a registered charity, who are dealing with the homeless or people who've been touched by the conflict in Gaza, and it's registered, then absolutely somebody should be allowed to wear that wristband. I do not see why people are trying to politicise a charity. I really do not. There's an agenda here. There's an agenda by certain people in our community to try and isolate those people who serve in the armed forces, veterans and their families from society. Because we stand up and say we want to support these people, somebody says we're doing something wrong. And I've got to say, people are starting to get absolutely bored of this.
But when you're talking about military conflicts in our world today, how can you say that's not already a politicised issue?
A charity is not a political issue. We're talking about
but
a charity.
It's related to conflicts.
It's
in the
not
world
related
today.
it's related to the aftermath of conflict. This is related to the aftermath of conflict, William. This is related to men and women who joined the armed forces, who have come back, who've been touched by that conflict, who need help. That's all it is.
We have a text here which says, of course police officers support foreign policies. They are government law keepers. They do the government's bidding. That's what they're for.
Well, they can support all they want. That's not the argument, and that's not the discussion we're having. The discussion we're having is a wristband of a registered charity, should it be worn or should it not be worn? The answer is it can be worn, it was allowed to be worn, it should be worn. It does not politicise a conflict, whether people like it or not. It politicises it doesn't politicise, but it supports a charity.
Then you get into a situation, Abdullah, where we either, if you're going to be consistent, we either allow police officers, whilst on duty, wearing the uniform, to wear the wristbands of any charity they like, any emblem, any badge they like. Would it not be more sensible, some would argue, that we simply ban all wristbands, all badges, except police emblems themselves?
Well, that's what I've been saying is about consistency. So, yes, either we ban all or we allow all. But to be selective, that's not fair for the police to be now a
Doug
propaganda
Beattie,
tool
you
for
get
one.
into a very difficult situation if you allow all charity emblems to be worn on a police uniform, don't you?
Well, that's up to the individual police force to decide what can and what can't be worn. Somebody tell me which charity emblem can't be worn by a police officer. Somebody come and tell me what they can't wear.
Well, in Northern Ireland,
I said at the very start, we have a very particular set of circumstances here in Northern Ireland where we have to be seen to be.
You couldn't wear a Help the Ages. You couldn't wear a Help the Aged wristband on a PSNI uniform. They've told us.
You can't wear nothing. No,
None.
you can't wear nothing. Absolutely can't.
Not even a friendship band.
But you can help. You can wear Help for Aged in London. Where's the issue with that? Do I see anybody going up and complaining about Help for the Aged?
There's a difference, isn't there?
Well, there is a difference. Of course there's a difference, but the reality is people are attacking our armed services here. People are attacking charities who support our armed services, and I just do not understand their rationale for it. Charity went out of his way to be offended, and he tried to create a scene. People are going out of their way to be offended by a charity that supports people who need help. I do not understand that agenda.
No one's defending Chowdhury here, by the way, nor the style and manner of how he accosted
or
the police
indeed
officer.
His posting of this video with a police officer in full view on the internet, if he did post it.
Indeed, but we have to ask, when the Tory government, for example, says that it will deny any public funding to any organisation remotely connected with quote-unquote extremism, for example, or any kind of advocacy of any cause, even of registered charities that might be deemed extremist, quote-unquote, by their own definition, then we have to ask about the fact that the government is not being consistent. So
let's take a pause there. We're going to come back with that. No, we're not rushing away. 08459 555 678. The calls continue. Let's get the news. It's 1 o'clock.
William Crawley with Talkback on BBC Radio Ulster.
Welcome back, and we've been talking about the footage that has appeared on YouTube of what happened in the streets of London when the radical Muslim cleric Anjem Chowdhury encountered a Metropolitan Police officer who was wearing a wristband from Help for Heroes. This is what happened.
I see you got your Help for Heroes badge on you. So what does that mean exactly? Is that a political agenda? Constable Addiston? Is that a political agenda? Why is it that millions of people came out on the streets to condemn the soldiers who murdered people in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yet you're supporting them with your Help for Heroes band?
It's not really relevant, is it?
It is relevant, because as an officer, you're not supposed to have a political agenda. You're not supposed to support the British government in their foreign policy, are you, really? And you have a band where you're supporting the soldiers of this country. So what does that mean exactly?
Anjem Chowdhury's behaviour there has been described as bullying by many people across the internet today who are debating this. Obviously, it's been tweeted across the world, and that's how these stories now gather speed. You've been texting and tweeting your response to it. Is it appropriate for a police officer to wear this kind of symbol, a wristband, for Help the Heroes, which is a charity offering assistance to British military personnel who have been injured on active duty? Warren says, I was furious with the officer for removing it. Alan says, that man went out of his way to be offended, in my opinion. Damien has tweeted to say, some of these heroes were attached to murderous Regiment, completely different view. Joey takes the view that the officer should only wear his uniform. Officers exercising law, he says, must be neutral. Paul says they should be as impartial as possible. It would be offensive to victims of state violence, he says, to see that on a police officer's uniform. What do you think? 08459 555 678. My guests, Doug Beattie and Abdullah Andalusi, are still with us. We'll get some of your reaction to this. Ray's up first. Hi, Ray.
Hello, William.
What do you think? Was this a political statement by the police officer?
No, it wasn't, because many police officers are ex-forces themselves. And for a member of Her Majesty's Forces, when they sign on, they don't sign on, I'll go and serve in Bangor or I'll go and serve in Basra. They sign on to do a job, putting their life on the line.
And they go where they're told. They serve where they're told to serve.
Exactly. And I'm ex-squatting. I'm proud of it. And for anybody to come and say to me, take that wristband off, I find that offensive. I might not have been as diplomatic as some people. I'd have told him to get on his bike and pedal his way back home. Nobody was brought into this country kicking and screaming. They came here because they were looking a softer touch than what they were getting where they were brought up. And yet they want to dictate to us how our society will live.
Well, you're talking about Anjem Chowdhury now. He's a British citizen. He's born in this country.
It doesn't matter. They are the guests in this country.
He was born in this country.
Fine. His parents came here to give him a decent life.
Ray, I have no idea why you're going down this line here. If somebody is a British citizen and they're living in Britain and they're born in Britain, why are you telling them to get on their bike and go home somewhere if they weren't born?
It's as simple as this. If they cannot support the people that live and die for this country, that they can have a voice that they can't have anywhere else, because it wouldn't be put up with.
All right, Ray, thank you very much. And of course, being a British citizen also means you have the freedom to disagree with the foreign policy of your own country if you choose to do so. Richard's there. Hi, Richard.
Good evening, William. William, a volunteer, somebody who joins the army, doesn't have a political agenda. They just join and they're told where to go. And if they get injured, well, I think it's an honourable thing to have a collection for them and have something like Help the Heroes. I think Chowdhury's suggestion should have been dismissed without hesitation by the police officer.
You think he should have just kept that wristband on?
Certainly should have been given short shift.
Richard, thanks very much. And the Metropolitan Police say the police officer has done nothing wrong. He wasn't required to take that band off. He chose to do so. That's a matter for himself. What do you think, Mary?
Hello.
Hi, Mary.
No, I think he should have kept it on. I mean, it wasn't doing any harm. He wasn't really advertising. You know what I mean? What's the title of it? For Heroes?
Help for Heroes, yeah.
Well, sure, heroes is just a word. The people who are caught up in those wars, as they say on TV so often, they're victims. You know, even ones in the army that they don't know they're going to get caught up in such things, you know.
And they haven't necessarily thought through all the politics of every decision, foreign policy decision, yeah. They just go where they're sent by the army.
Yes.
Mary, thanks a lot. Brian's there too. Hi, Brian.
Hi. I don't know why the policeman didn't show some backbone and actually arrest Chowdhury.
What crime would he have committed?
Conduct likely to lead to a breach of the peace. Because him haranguing the police officer over something as inflammatory as the Help for Heroes and the way he was going about it is that could have provoked other people within the vicinity to commit a breach of the peace.
Brian, thank you very much. Interesting suggestion, Abdullah. Do you think that would have been a helpful response from the police officer?
Well, no. As long as someone is keeping within the laws and so on, obviously no one should be arrested for expressing their opinion.
But you're not allowed to bully police officers, for goodness sake, are you?
No, I don't think a police officer would have let anyone bully them. They have the authority to arrest people and so on. So I think he would have drawn the line or given them a warning, as all police officers do. But I would like to raise just...
We only played 22 seconds of that clip, incidentally. It's a couple of minutes of Anjem Chowdhury just giving it to this police officer with the camera there.
I know, but the police officer, I mean, if you start to annoy a police officer, the police officer say, cease and desist, otherwise I'm going to arrest you.
He's lucky he got such a generous police officer.
Yeah, well,
on this occasion.
But I want to raise a point, though. conscientious objection is allowed. It's legal. You can, as a soldier, if you're sent to a war that you disagree with, and there was many cases where soldiers being deployed to Afghanistan, before they were deployed, they said, look, we don't want to go and we want to be discharged from the army because we don't want to go there. And that's what happened. So to say that soldiers are mindless lemmings, that you just direct them and they just go with no mind of their own, is inaccurate. And, you can't just say we were just following orders. But also, I'd like to put a point that what if there was a police person or anyone who wants to have a wristband that said help for wounded or Syrian opposition fighters returning from the war, just giving them medical aid and, prosthetic limbs and so on. Some people would even say that's supporting, very controversial individuals, and there'd be outrage at that. Although the British government, supports Syrian opposition fighters. But the thing is this, we have our priorities in the wrong way, that we must support soldiers who went to unjust wars, but at the same time we criminalise others who are in similar situations. So I would just say that just consistency, that's really what's trying to be argued, that the government shouldn't impose one set of values just to score some nationalism, some points on the nationalism index, and just say, yes, we're so British, but rather to permit anyone to express, to advocate a cause and say, support this charity X, Y, and Z, or no one, and just be completely impartial. And to be frankly, I don't think police or civil servants or anyone should be billboards for any particular cause while they're on duty.
08459 555 678. We'll hear from Doug Beattie in a second. Let's go to George next. Hi, George.
Hello, William. Hi, William. I was just speaking to one of your people there. I live in Carrickfergus. I served in the military for 22 years, and I'm wearing a Help for Heroes sweatshirt right this minute as I talk to you, and also a Help for Heroes wristband. Now, if somebody comes up to me in Carrick and says, take that off, you honestly think I'm going to do it?
Well, no, but the question is, if you were a serving police officer, whether you should wear emblems of that kind.
Why not? I don't see the problem.
The PSNI see a problem with it. They've banned it.
Yeah, but are they not allowed to wear poppies at certain times? No?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so what's the difference? William?
Well, all I can tell you is we've been in touch with them, and they've told us that all wristbands are banned except for medical advisory bands. Okay, then, so if a policeman bought a wristwatch with a picture of a Spitfire or something on it, would he have to take that off? I think we're getting too detailed now, aren't we? George, thank you very much. Can I just say, George, you missed your calling. You should have become a lawyer. John is there too. Hi, John.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Good afternoon, John.
I'll make 3 quick points. Point number 1, I didn't support the war in Iraq or Afghanistan. I thought it was a needless waste of all Allied forces' lives, because the countries know better, the two countries know better. Point number 2, a soldier, him or her, have no choice to where they are sent. They are simply told to go by the government of the day. My heart goes out to all the servicemen and women, fully support them. And point number 3, I go to show how gutless a police force we have, and them that control them, that don't allow them to wear the Help for Heroes armband. Shame on them. Shame on them. Should wear it with pride. And the last caller made the point about wearing a wristwatch with a Spitfire on it. You can have watches with Help the Heroes on the front of them, on the watches. But a PSNI offer woman allowed to wear that either. No, we only asked the PSNI about wristbands. Yes, well, we haven't asked them about watches. PSNI as a police force of a policeman anyway, so don't walk around that road. They are. Well, that's your view, John. Not everybody will agree with you. Pardon? That's your view. Not everybody will agree with you, but thank you. Mr. Crawley, would you do me a favour? Okay. Would you do a straw poll of your listeners and ask them, how many people actually think that PSNI are a police force of appeasement? Thank you very much, John. Unfortunately, we don't do referendums here. We just do opinions. And Doug Beattie has one. Share it with us. Well, I think, William, that we're really getting into the morality of war and the morality of conflict here. Well, you are, aren't you? And we're slightly confusing that from what is a registered charity which helps people. Now, some of those people it helps were injured
building schools in Afghanistan. Some of those people lost their legs as they sunk a well to give the people of Afghanistan fresh water. We are focusing on the armed conflict that happened in Afghanistan because Help for Heroes was set up for Afghanistan injured veterans. And that's what we're focusing on is the conflict side of things. But I'll tell you now, having done 3 tours of Afghanistan and the last one finished in 2011, 90% of my time was spent living with, talking to and helping the people of that country. It wasn't spent fighting them. And I'm not unusual, and I wasn't behind a desk. I was at the front line, and that's what we did. And I watched friends who were injured, who were seriously wounded, who have come back with serious mental issues while they were building schools and sinking wells for water. How can it be wrong to help them?
Doug, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Doug Beattie. Thanks also to Abdullah Al-Andalusi.